The automatic doors of the supermarket slid open with a faint hiss, releasing a wave of cold, conditioned air into the hot afternoon. People walked in and out without noticing the small figure who hesitated at the entrance. A thin black woman, her clothes worn, her face cansada, and beside her, a little girl holding her hand tightly, her eyes wide, empty, and silently begging. They had walked for hours, not because they wanted to, but because hunger leaves no one sitting still. The woman's heartbeat quickened as she stepped inside. She wasn't used to places like that anymore. Clean aisles, bright lights, shelves stocked with more food than she could dream of buying. But today she had promised her daughter something, anything, to stop the hunger that had been clawing at their stomachs since yesterday. As they approached the checkout counters, the girl's tiny voice trembled. "Mommy, can we really eat something today?" The mother swallowed hard. Her throat burned from trying not to cry. She squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered, "I'll try, bébé. I'll try." When they reached the cashier, the young employee looked up, expecting a normal customer. But instead, the woman lowered her head, her voice shaking like someone confessing a sin. "Excuse me, sir, please. Do you have anything expired? A cookie? A bread? Anything you throw away? My daughter hasn't eaten since yesterday." The cashier froze. It wasn't the kind of request he heard every day. Some people glanced over, curious. Others pretended not to hear. But the mother stood there trembling, desperately hoping for a miracle. "Ma'am," the cashier whispered, unsure of what to say. Before he could finish, heavy footsteps echoed from the other side of the store. The manager, tall, rigid, with a face carved in permanent irritation. He approached quickly, and his voice sliced through the air. "What is happening here?" The cashier tried to explain, but the manager cut him off, glaring at the woman as though she were a criminal. "You cannot stand here begging. This is a business, not a charity." The mother stepped back, holding her daughter tightly. I'm not begging. I just asked if there was something old, something you would throw out." But the manager already lifted his hand, signaling the security guards. "Escort her out. Immediately." A wave of humiliation washed over her. The little girl hid her face against her mother's torn shirt, shaking in fear. People in the line whispered, judged, stared, but no one moved, no one spoke, no one stopped the injustice happening in front of them. But what no one had noticed, not even the mother, was that directly behind her in the line stood a young man, quiet, observing everything. Black hoodie, hands in pockets, calm eyes that didn't judge, but understood. No one knew his face, but millions knew his name. A billionaire, a prodigy, a man whose decisions could change companies, cities, and now, perhaps, a destiny. He watched as the guards approached the mother, and in that moment, something inside him shifted, because what he saw was not a homeless woman. He saw his past, and he wasn't going to let history repeat itself. He took one step forward, and the entire story, the story of that mother, her daughter, and a man who carried ghosts of his own, was about to change forever. The young millionaire, Ethan Cole, didn't move at first. He simply watched, silently, intensely, as the scene unfolded in front of him. The mother trembled, not because she was afraid of the guards, but because she feared for her daughter. The little girl held her hand tightly, eyes wide, confused and frightened. The guards approached with the usual coldness of men queuing for a job they never wanted. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside," one said, placing a hand near her shoulder. She flinched, not from the touch, but from the humiliation. I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. My daughter hasn't eaten since yesterday. I just thought maybe there were some broken cookies, expired bread, anything you throw away. Just something for her." Her words fell to the floor like shattered glass. No one picked them up. No one cared enough to. Not the cashier who avoided eye contact. Not the manager who puffed up his chest as if punishing the poor increased his status. Not the other customers who shifted uncomfortably, pretending to scroll on their phones. But Ethan heard every word, every tremor, every fracture of her dignity, and something ancient, something deep within him, something he thought money had buried, began to rise. The manager snapped his fingers impatiently. "Take her out, now. We don't allow beggars inside the store." The girl squeezed her mother's hand tighter and whispered, "Mama, did we do something wrong?" The mother's eyes filled instantly. No, baby. No. Mama just... But she couldn't finish. Her voice finally broke under the weight of years, maybe a lifetime, of being unseen. The guards moved in. One took her by the arm. The other motioned for the child to follow. That was the moment Ethan took a step forward. Just one step, but it echoed through the entire store. It was like the atmosphere thickened. Even the guards paused, sensing an unexpected shift. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was louder than the manager's arrogance. "Let her go," he said. The manager turned, irritated. "Sir, this is store policy. She's creating a disturbance?" Ethan interrupted him, but gently, almost politely. "Your policy allows you to throw food away, but not to give it to a starving child." The manager blinked. "Well, that's not the point." "Actually," Ethan said, taking another step forward, "that's exactly the point." People started watching. Phones came down. Eyes lifted. Whispers spread. The mother looked at Ethan with disbelief, as if not sure whether he was real or another painful hope destined to betray her. Ethan crouched down to the little girl's level. He smiled softly. "When was the last time you ate, sweetheart?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Yesterday morning." Something pierced him, deeper than pity, more like a memory of a time when he too had been hungry, forgotten, invisible. He turned to the guards. "You can let go of her arm now." They exchanged glances. This man, he wasn't asking. He wasn't negotiating. He was telling them. Slowly, they released her. The mother pressed her daughter to her chest in relief. Then Ethan stood, lifted his chin slightly, and said to the manager with a calmness that terrified him, "Not only will she stay, but I'm paying for her groceries today." A gasp moved through the store. The manager stuttered, "Sir, that's really unnecessary." Ethan cut him off. "Oh, I'm not finished." And as he turned to the shelves, something extraordinary, something completely unexpected, was about to happen. Something that would transform this humiliation into a miracle, and mark the beginning of a story that the entire city would talk about for years. Because Ethan Cole didn't just intend to buy them food, he intended to change their entire destiny. And no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for what he would utter. The store fell into a strange silence as the security guards stepped closer to the woman and her daughter. People in the line began whispering, some pretending not to see, others staring with quiet judgment. The little girl clung to her mother's leg, her eyes wide and scared, as if she already understood that the world wasn't always kind to people like them. The mother raised her hands gently, not in fear, but in a gesture of dignity, as if trying to show she meant no harm. "I'm not stealing," she said softly. "I just want something for her to eat. Anything. Even if it's expired. I don't care. Please." But the manager didn't hear the desperation, or maybe he refused to. "Ma'am, you can't disturb the customers," he snapped, signaling the guards more aggressively. "You need to leave, now." The guards stepped even closer, and the little girl began to cry, not loudly, but in the heartbreaking way of a child who has cried too many times before. And then, a voice cut through the tense air. "Stop." It wasn't loud, but it carried a force that made everyone turn around. It was the young man standing right behind them, the same one observing silently just moments earlier. He stepped forward, eyes focused on the scene, jaw tight, expression unreadable. The manager blinked, confused. "Sir, this doesn't concern..." The young man raised a hand. "It concerns me now." He walked around the mother and positioned himself between her and the guards, like a barrier made of calmness and authority. The guards hesitated. The manager stiffened. The mother stared in disbelief, and the little girl wiped her tears. Sensing something had shifted, the young man crouched down so he was eye level with the little girl. "Hey," he said, softly. "What's your name?" "Luna," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled gently. "Hi, Luna. Are you hungry?" She nodded, too tired to hide her truth. He stood back up and looked at the manager with a seriousness that made the man swallow hard. "This woman didn't ask for charity," he said. "She asked for leftovers, something expired, something you'd throw in the trash." The manager crossed his arms, still defensive. "It's policy, sir. We can't..." "Policy?" The young man cut him off. His, voice grew firm. "You're using policy to humiliate someone who's trying to feed their child?" A murmuring ripple moved through the people watching, but no one expected what would happen next. The young man pulled something out of his pocket. Not a wallet, but a black titanium card, the kind only the super wealthy carry, the kind you almost never see in public. The lights of the supermarket reflected off it like a blade of obsidian. He held it between two fingers and said, "I'm buying their, groceries." The manager's expression froze, and the guards immediately stepped back, uncertain. But the young man wasn't finished. "No," he continued, "I'm buying everything they need, not just today, not just this week, everything." The whole line gasped. Even the cashiers stopped scanning items. Luna's eyes widened again, but this time in shock, not fear. He turned to the mother, whose lips trembled as if she couldn't form words. "You don't deserve to be treated this way," he said gently. No mother should ever have to beg for food for her child. Her eyes filled with tears, but not of shame anymore. Tears of something deeper, something fragile, something like hope coming back to life. Then he did something that made the entire store go silent again. He took the little girl's hand and placed it in her mother's. "Today," he said softly, "your life changes." But behind his calm smile, something else moved inside him, something no one in that store could see yet. Because the young man wasn't helping out of pity. He was helping because he recognized something from his own past, something that would soon reveal a truth that would shake everyone in that supermarket. And that revelation would turn an act of kindness into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. The manager's voice echoed through the aisles as he snapped at the security guards to hurry. The shoppers around pretended not to look, but everyone's attention was glued to the scene. Some whispered. Others shook their heads. A few even rolled their eyes, as if the mother's desperation was an inconvenience to their peaceful shopping. The little girl clung to her mother's torn jacket, her tiny fingers trembling. She didn't understand humiliation, only hunger. "Mommy, did we do something bad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The mother swallowed pain so sharp it felt like swallowing glass. "No, my love, you did nothing wrong," she said, though her voice cracked at the edges. Before she could say more, one of the guards placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, you need to leave. You can't bother customers asking for expired food. This is not allowed." The mother lifted her hands as if surrendering in a war she never chose to fight. "I wasn't begging," she whispered. "I was just hoping to feed my child. Anything at all." "Rules are rules," the guard replied coldly. But then, a voice from behind cut through the tension like a blade. "Take your hands off her." The guard turned, annoyed at being interrupted, but the annoyance drained from his face the moment he saw who had spoken. Standing there was the young man from earlier, the quiet shopper who had been observing everything. But now he looked completely different. His presence carried a weight no one could ignore. People suddenly moved aside without being asked. Even the busy cashier stopped scanning items. The manager stepped forward quickly, forcing a smile. "Sir, is everything okay? We're just handling a small situation." "A situation?" the young man repeated slowly. "That woman asked for expired cookies. Not money, not favors, not anything illegal. And your response was to humiliate her and call security?" The manager's smile collapsed like a badly built wall. We have policies. She can't ask." "Oh, I know your policies," the young man said sharply. "I own 3 of your corporate branches in the city." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Everyone stared. Even the guards froze. The mother blinked, confused. Her daughter peeked out from behind her, unsure whether to be afraid or hopeful. The manager's face went pale. "Sir, I didn't know." "No," the young man interrupted. "You didn't care." Then he turned to the guards. "Let go of her. Now." They obeyed instantly. The mother stepped back, holding her daughter close, unsure if she should stay or run. The young man knelt down, right there on the supermarket floor, to be at eye level with the little girl. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Amelia." He smiled softly. "Amelia, are you hungry?" She nodded. "How long since you ate?" he asked quietly. The mother lowered her head, ashamed. "Since yesterday morning," she said. "It's been hard. I've lost my job. We lost our home. We're staying in a shelter that doesn't give meals." The young man inhaled slowly, something breaking inside him as he listened. Then he stood up and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Get a cart, a large one." The cashier blinked. "What?" "A cart," he repeated, "and fill it. Food, clothes, toiletries, first aid supplies, Everything a family needs. People gasped. The manager stuttered, "Sir, is this?" and put it all on my account. The young man said, "Every single item." Then he turned to the stunned mother. "Today," he said softly, "you don't worry about feeding your daughter." Her lips trembled. "Sir, I can't accept. It's not charity," he said. "It's humanity." Tears fell down her face, silent, shaking, overwhelming. She pressed her forehead to her daughter's and sobbed, unable to contain years of pain compressed into one moment of relief. But the moment wasn't over. The young man took out his phone, dialed a number, and said calmly, "Get the keys ready. I want the 2-bedroom apartment near the waterfront prepared immediately, fully furnished, stock the fridge, deliver blankets, heaters, and children's clothes, and cancel the rental fees for the first year." The mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, why are you doing all this?" He looked at her with a softness that silenced the entire building. "Because no child should ever have to beg for expired food, and no mother should ever be punished for trying to protect her child." The crowd was no longer silent out of shock. They were silent out of shame. The manager lowered his head. The guards stepped back, and in that moment everyone realized. For a few seconds nobody spoke. The young millionaire stood there, his jaw clenched, staring at the manager as if trying to understand how a simple request for food had turned into something tone cruel, tone desumano. But as he looked back at the mother, now sitting on the curb outside, holding her daughter close, murmuring something softly into her hair, something inside him broke, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but out of recognition, because just a few years earlier, he had been on that same curb, before the world knew his name, before the magazines, the interviews, the companies. He had been a hungry child too, abandoned by a father he never knew, and raised by a mother who worked 3 jobs and still sometimes couldn't afford a loaf of bread. And on one winter night, when he was 9 years old, his mother had gone into a bakery and whispered the same painful question, "Do you have anything expired? Anything you would throw away? My son hasn't eaten today." He remembered the cold. He remembered the shame. He remembered the sting of being looked at like a beggar, like trash, and the memory hit him so hard that for a moment he couldn't breathe. He walked out of the store and approached the mother slowly, kneeling in front of her so he wouldn't scare the child. The little girl hid her face against her mother's shoulder, trembling, not from cold, but from everything she had just witnessed. The mother looked up, eyes swollen, voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to cause trouble. I just wanted something small for her. She hasn't eaten since yesterday." She tried to give a small smile, a broken one, the kind mothers make when they're hurting, but still trying to look strong in front of their children. The millionaire felt his chest tighten again, but this time with a fierce determination. He stood, turned to the security guards, who were still watching awkwardly, and said firmly, "Please return to your post. She is not leaving." Then he walked back into the store, the entire line silently parting for him. Even the manager stepped back, suddenly unsure, suddenly small. The young man didn't stop at the front counter. He didn't grab a few items. He took a cart, and he began filling it, first with fresh fruit, then bread, milk, vegetables, hot meals from the deli, cookies, cereal, juice, everything a child might whisper a wish for. And when the cart was full, he took another, and filled that one too. The store fell silent. Every employee froze. Every customer watched, wide-eyed, realizing they were witnessing something they would never forget. By the time he was done, he had filled 3 carts. He then pushed them outside, one by one, stopping in front of the stunned mother. "This," he said softly, "is just the beginning." Tears streamed down her face, but she shook her head desperately. No, I can't accept this. It's too much. You don't even know me." The young man crouched again, looking into her eyes with a gentleness she hadn't felt in years. "I know enough," he replied. "I know what hunger looks like. I know what fear feels like. And I know what a mother's love is, because my mother was you once." The woman covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, her daughter hugging her tightly. But the millionaire wasn't finished, because what he was about to say next. For a long moment, the supermarket was silent, not because people suddenly became kind, but because nobody knew how to process what they had just witnessed. The young millionaire, Noah Williams, the man whose face estampava capas de revistas, was now standing beside a homeless mother and her starving daughter, challenging every unspoken rule society had created about who deserves help. The manager, suddenly nervous, forced a clumsy smile. "Sir, I didn't realize who you were. We can, of course, arrange something different." Noah didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on the mother. "Ma'am," he said softly, "what's your name?" She hesitated as if unused to someone actually caring. My name is Liana," she whispered, "and this is my daughter Amina." Amina clutched her mother's sleeve, her eyes big, tired, and frightened. But there was also hope there, the kind of hope children still dare to feel. Noah knelt down so he could look straight into the girl's eyes. "Amina," he said gently, "are you hungry, sweetheart?" Her little head nodded, not once, but again and again, as if each movement released a tiny piece of the pain she had been hiding. Noah swallowed hard. Her honesty struck him like a punch. He stood up slowly, turned to the manager, and with a calmness that was more terrifying than shouting, he said, "Every single item in this store is now available for this woman. She will walk through every aisle and take what she needs, and you will treat her with respect while she does." The manager blinked fast, confused. "Sir, I don't think the company policy—" Noah took out his black card, placed it in the man's hand, and said, "Charge it. Every single week." A gasp rippled through the store, but Noah didn't stop. He continued, voice steady, almost commanding, "And if I ever hear that she was mistreated again, I'll buy this supermarket, not to own it, but to fire everyone who thinks throwing out a starving mother is acceptable." The cashiers froze. The security guards looked at each other, unsure if they still had jobs. The manager's face went pale, then red, but Liana just stared at Noah as tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help someone like me?" Noah looked at her, truly looked at her, before answering. "Because when I was 8 years old, my mother stood in a line just like this one, homeless, hungry, humiliated, and someone behind her paid for our groceries." He took a breath. "That moment saved my life, saved my future, saved everything I've become." The world seemed to go quiet. He continued, "I promised her, before she died, that whenever I saw someone standing where she once stood, I would step in, not as a millionaire." He shook his head, but as a human being. Amina suddenly stepped forward and wrapped her tiny arms around his leg. It was instinctive, pure, innocent, the hug of a child who had been hungry for far more than food. Noah's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. He placed a gentle hand on her head. "From today on," he said softly, "you will never starve again." The entire supermarket was watching, some ashamed, some inspired, some confused, but every single one of them was seeing something unforgettable. Then Noah added the words that would forever change that family's destiny. "Liana, Amina, you're coming with me. Today we start your new life." And no one in that supermarket, not the manager, not the cashiers, not the customers, not even the security guards, would ever forget the moment the poorest woman in the room was treated like the most precious. The door swung open as the three of them walked out together. A mother, a child, and a man who refused to let history repeat itself. Little did they know, the real transformation was only just beginning. The tension in the supermarket had barely settled when the young millionaire, still processing what he had just witnessed, stepped forward. He felt a wave of anger and disbelief, a mix of emotions that refused to let him stay silent. How could anyone treat a mother and her child this way? How could hunger, poverty, and desperation evoke such cruelty in the heart of people who held power? The mother, trembling, hugged her daughter tightly, whispering words of reassurance. She barely believed herself. Her hands were dirty, her clothes tattered, and yet there was an unmistakable dignity in the way she tried to shield her child from the world's harsh gaze. Around them, whispers and murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Some customers looked down at their carts, avoiding the eyes of the family. Others were frozen, shocked into silence. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, with the weight of judgment, misunderstanding, and the raw vulnerability of poverty exposed in such a public place. The millionaire's mind raced. He had seen hardship before, had donated, had helped through charity foundations. But this was different. This was real, immediate, undeniable. A child's stomach growling, a mother's desperation, a world so indifferent that even a simple request for expired cookies was treated as a crime. His heart clenched. Then came the pivotal moment, a pause. The manager, trying to assert control, straightened up, eyes darting nervously as the crowd began to stir. Security officers loomed over the mother, but the millionaire stepped in, his presence commanding attention. He didn't yell, he didn't demand. He simply walked toward them, calm yet resolute, and the world seemed to pause around him. "Stop," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "Step aside. She is a human being. She has done nothing wrong. You will not treat her like this." The manager hesitated, caught off guard by someone speaking with both power and compassion. The security guards exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to comply. The mother clutched her daughter even tighter, tears brimming in her eyes, sensing, perhaps for the first time in months, that someone could see her not as a burden, but as a person. The millionaire didn't stop there. He turned toward the crowd. "Look at her," he said. "This is someone's mother, someone's daughter. She is someone's hope, and yet she stands here humiliated, hungry, desperate. Who among us can say they would not do the same if faced with her circumstances?" There was a stir in the crowd. Heads turned, voices hushed. Some faces showed shame, others curiosity, and a few a flicker of empathy that had long been buried beneath convenience and comfort. As he spoke, he reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. But it wasn't just money he offered. It was opportunity. It was connection. It was a promise to intervene in a system that had failed this family. He had the means to make a difference, and he could feel, deep in his chest, that he couldn't walk away without doing something that would forever change their lives. The mother, still wary, looked up at him. Her eyes, wide with uncertainty and disbelief, searched his face for any hint of deception. But all she saw was sincerity, a rare clarity that cut through the shame and fear that had clung to her for so long. And in that instant, the line between the privileged and the powerless, the giver and the receiver, the bystander and the activist, began to blur. The millionaire realized that this encounter was not a random coincidence. It was a moment that had been orchestrated in some invisible way for him to act, to intervene, to rewrite a life that had been trapped in struggle for far too long. Yet, just as he prepared to take the next step, to speak, to help, to transform, the supermarket doors opened with a sudden gust of wind, and a commotion from the street outside drew the attention of everyone inside. Voices shouted, wheels screeched, and the scene suddenly shifted. The mother clutched her daughter, instinctively moving closer to her side, eyes darting toward the source of the noise. The millionaire froze, realizing that whatever was coming next could change everything again, possibly for good or for worse. And in that suspended moment, the air seemed to crackle with anticipation. No one knew what would happen. No one could predict the next turn of events. The story, it seemed, was far from over. The millionaire's hand hovered, ready to act. The mother held her daughter, waiting, and the entire supermarket, every witness, every employee, every customer, was caught in a fragile, electrifying silence, waiting for the next moment that would determine their fates. The noise from outside intensified for a moment, drawing the attention of everyone in the supermarket. But the millionaire's eyes never left the mother and her daughter. Something inside him shifted, an unshakable certainty that he was meant to act, to change this story in a way no one expected. He stepped forward calmly but deliberately, and placed his hand gently on the mother's shoulder. She flinched at first, but his eyes, steady and sincere, reassured her without words. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "Today things change." He turned to the store manager, whose face was still flushed with indignation. "This woman is not a criminal. She is a mother. She is a human being, and she deserves help, not humiliation." His tone left no room for argument. The manager opened his mouth, stammered, then finally nodded, stepping aside. The millionaire then reached into his pocket and handed her a thick envelope. She opened it slowly, eyes widening as she saw it was filled not just with cash, but with letters, phone numbers, and vouchers, resources that could secure food, shelter, and education for her daughter. It was an entire lifeline, carefully thought out as if he had been planning it for months. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the envelope to her chest. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Her voice trembled, barely audible. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "Just promise me you'll take care of your daughter. Promise me you'll rise." Then something even more extraordinary happened. The young millionaire noticed the people around. Them, the customers who had been silently watching, some indifferent, some judging, some compassionate. One by one they began to approach, offering what they could: food, coats, small donations. The atmosphere shifted completely. What had begun as a moment of shame turned into a wave of generosity that no one could have predicted. The mother's daughter looked up at the millionaire, her eyes shining with innocence and trust. "Sir," she said softly, "will we be okay?" "Yes," he said, smiling. "From now on, you will be." It was as if a weight lifted from the entire supermarket. The tension, the fear, the judgment, they all dissolved into an energy of hope, compassion, and possibility. And in that moment, the millionaire realized something profound. Helping this family wasn't just an act of charity, it was a revelation. It reminded him, and everyone watching, that the smallest gestures of kindness can change destinies, that the power to alter lives lies in recognizing humanity, even in the most unexpected places. As they walked out of the store, the mother holding her daughter tightly, the millionaire followed, watching silently. He knew that this encounter had changed him too. His perspective on wealth, privilege, and responsibility had shifted forever. And though the city outside buzzed with life, the impact of that moment, a mother, a child, a witness, and a heart willing to act, would ripple far beyond the walls of that supermarket. No one would forget it. Not the mother, not her daughter, not the millionaire, and certainly not those who witnessed the miracle of empathy and courage unfold before their eyes. And in the quiet aftermath, as they stepped into the sunlight, the world seemed a little smaller, a little kinder, and a little more full of hope than it had before.